Is It Me or Is It My Nystagmus? A presentation by Sue Ricketts from the Nystagmus Network. The Nystagmus Network is a registered charity. We're here to support adults with nystagmus, parents and their children. You can find our website at www.nystagmusnetwork.org. Our charitable objectives are to provide information and support, to raise awareness of the condition, and to fund research. The way we provide support is that we run an information and support line, and you can call us at any time on 01427 718 093. We also provide a whole range of information documents that are free to download from our website. We have leaflets on all kinds of things relating to nystagmus, such as nystagmus and driving, nystagmus and benefits, nystagmus and registration, all kinds of things. One of the leaflets that we're most proud of is our booklet for small children called Wobbly Eyes. And in that we talk about nystagmus and its effects, so that young children can understand it. You can share that book with your child, and when they're old enough, they can read it for themselves and share it with their friends. And what we also include in that booklet is not just about the effects on the eyes, but how other children might perceive you if you have wobbly eyes yourself. We run monthly forums online for parents of children with nystagmus and for adults who have congenital or acquired nystagmus. It's a great way of feeling that you're not the only one. Although nystagmus isn't exactly a rare condition, we estimate that roughly 1 in 1,000 people live with the condition. It's quite unusual for you, if you have nystagmus, to meet someone else who has it. So this is a great way for you to discover and make friends and find out more and share experiences with other people living with the condition. One of our objectives as a charity is to raise awareness of nystagmus, and we do that in all sorts of ways. We provide training in person and online, and of course principally through our National and International Nystagmus Awareness Day, which happens every year on the 20th of June. So we've just enjoyed Nystagmus Awareness Day 2021, and our theme for this year was raindrops. That's because last year a young man told us that he'd only just realised that because of his nystagmus, he couldn't see rain falling, and he'd thought it was invisible to everyone. And it turned out that people who don't have nystagmus can actually see rain falling. So this sparked our imagination and got us thinking, and so we devised competitions around the theme of raindrops. So for the children, there was a story writing competition, and for the adults, they were charged with capturing raindrops on film and creating images with their phones and cameras so that we could all enjoy raindrops. So that was Nystagmus Awareness Day 2021. As a charity, we also host an annual nystagmus research workshop. This was our online version last year, 2020, online for obvious reasons, and these are just some of the delegates that were taking part. There are 6 main centres of excellence for nystagmus research in the UK, and representatives from all of those teams always come along to our annual workshop. One of the most exciting developments from the workshop has been the creation of what we call the NUC group, which stands for Nystagmus UK Research Group. And we like to think that one day we will all nuke nystagmus together, in that we will find effective treatments, prevention, and possibly even a cure at some point. But until that day happens, we're all working together. The Nystagmus Network is a lay patient voice partner of the NUC group, and we're working towards something which is called the Nystagmus Care Pathway, which will ensure that everyone at the point of diagnosis, whether they are an adult or a child, will receive the same level of care and the same standard of advice, information and support wherever they are in the country. because our researchers understand that not only do people want to know more about their diagnosis, what may have caused the nystagmus, where it came from in the first place, and about potential treatments going forward, but they always also want to have lots of information and support for the more social and emotional issues, support for education and in employment and throughout their lives. And that's what the Nystagmus Care Pathway will ensure. So going back to basics just for a second, what is nystagmus? Nystagmus is characterised by involuntary, uncontrollable movement of the eyes. Sometimes we call it wobbly eyes. It's a recognised visual disability, a form of visual impairment. It is a lifelong condition, and it can be a standalone condition, or it can be associated with a variety of other eye conditions or health issues or syndromes, such as Down syndrome, albinism, and aniridia, of course. We calculate that a large proportion of people who have aniridia also have nystagmus. And finally, of course, sadly, nystagmus remains incurable currently. Here's what 11-year-old George says about nystagmus. He says, "It means my eyes sometimes move without me wanting them to. It means sometimes I find it difficult to see things. It means I can only see about 3 meters clearly. It hurts my eyes if I have to look at long distances." Now that's George's view of his nystagmus, but it is different for some people. It varies the amount of vision you have, the distance vision you have. Most people with nystagmus are fairly short-sighted, but some are equally long-sighted. So it's a very personal description there by George of what nystagmus is like for him. And what you have to remember, of course, is that George doesn't know what it's like not to have nystagmus, so he has nothing to compare it to. Last year, we published a guide called Nystagmus Is, a Guide for Adults. And this was compiled from all the comments that we'd received from adults living with the condition, describing what it was like and how it made them feel to have nystagmus. One of the most notable quotes from that, I think, is this one, which is, "Nystagmus is where you see everything, but the one thing you're looking for, which was right in front of you all along." And that's very typical of a person with nystagmus. This is due to a phenomenon called visual crowding, which I'll talk about again in a short while, but it's something that has been brought to the fore by one of our research teams recently. Did you know that TV presenter Richard Osman has nystagmus? He stars in our video, which is called Nystagmus, The Way We See It, and you can view that on YouTube. It's had around 200,000 views so far, and I think it still remains one of the best shorthand ways of explaining to someone who doesn't know what nystagmus is. So as I said earlier, nystagmus does affect everyone differently. It affects the visual acuity, or how clearly you can see, particularly at distance. It affects peripheral vision, your all-round vision. It affects three-dimensional perception, which means that people who have nystagmus do find it very difficult to judge depth. Young children find it hard to cope with stairs initially, for example, because they can't judge how high they are, whether they're going up or down. And also this affects speed perception, which is very evident when children and young people start to play sports, particularly ball sports. They find catching a ball moving at speed quite difficult because of the lack of 3D perception. Light sensitivity is also quite a common phenomenon with nystagmus, and glare is an issue as well. And there we are back to visual crowding. Now, visual crowding is this thing where it's very difficult to pick out one face in a crowd or one item in an image, or if you're looking at a table full of objects, to pick out the one thing that you're looking for. It's because somehow the eyes and the brain don't seem to be able to cope with a very busy image. Sometimes when young children are starting school with nystagmus, we do explain to teachers that a child with nystagmus will need to have a nice clear classroom environment to navigate around initially, and it doesn't help if there's lots of clutter in a room, for example, or things get moved around quite a lot. But nystagmus affects more than just the sight, as I was hinting at earlier. It affects the general well-being of a person. Their mobility and gait can be affected. A lot of people with nystagmus do have balance issues, and it can also affect the mental health. I'll talk more about that in a moment. So what are the social and emotional aspects of nystagmus, and why might these arise? First of all, eye contact is a very big one. Eye contact is all about the first impressions that you make when you meet new people. We have it drummed into us that making eye contact is a good way to engage with people, particularly in things like a job interview situation. But people with nystagmus find it very, very difficult to make eye contact in the first place, and certainly to maintain eye contact because of the uncontrollable eye movements. So for this reason, people with nystagmus are sometimes thought to be shy or coy or even a bit shifty because they don't look people in the eye. So you can imagine what kind of social effect this might have on a person. People with nystagmus find it difficult to read social cues. So, for example, people tell me all the time, I'm never quite sure if someone is joking because I can't see their facial expression very well. Body language is quite difficult to read too if you have nystagmus. So this can make social interactions a little bit awkward. Recognising friends in busy places in particular is very challenging, again coming back to that phenomenon of visual crowding. And joining in with conversations or games can be difficult too. Adults will say to me, I never know quite when it's my turn to speak, or I don't know quite when it's my turn if we're playing a game, bowling or something like that. So again, that can make social situations difficult, challenging. Nystagmus can affect the independence. Most people with nystagmus are unable to drive, not always because of the visual acuity, but often more because of the peripheral vision, which of course is so vital when it comes to driving. So this can affect independence. It can affect where you choose to live, where you choose to study, and where you can work. Some people talk about hopelessness or the not knowing with nystagmus. If you're an adult who has nystagmus now and you were diagnosed some years ago as a small child, you may never have known why you had it. In that instance, I often advise people to go back to their GP and get a referral back to a consultant ophthalmologist, because things have moved on in recent years, and certainly in the last 30 years or so, in diagnostics. And it is now possible to identify in a lot more cases why the nystagmus is there than it was a while ago. So that can help get around the hopelessness or the not knowing why you have it. Because of a lot of the social issues and emotional issues with nystagmus, people do sometimes struggle with low self-esteem. it might be difficult to make friends and to keep friends and to keep joining in with social activities. This can lead to isolation and sadly also to depression. Here's another quote from that guide, Nystagmus is, "I can't see the expression on your face, so please make it clear how you feel." So again, if you're talking to someone with nystagmus or impaired vision generally, always explain to them if you are joking, because that person may not be able to tell that you're joking just by a slight gesture or the look on your face. Here's another quote from Nystagmus is, "I don't like crowded places and usually avoid them if I can. The sensory overload can make me panic." That's a typical scenario where someone is faced with, say, a busy bus or train station. There are lots of people bustling around. They need to work out which platform they need for their bus or train. They need to find the departure board and so on. They can be very crowded, very noisy places, and people with nystagmus, because of their reduced vision, will often suffer from this sensory overload, and that can indeed cause very real feelings of panic. Here's a great tip for you from one of our Nystagmus community members. Always arrive early, so your friends have to find you. If you have nystagmus, there's nothing worse than walking into a crowded bar, restaurant or cafe and trying to find the person that you're meant to be meeting. If you arrive early, they have to find you, and then that's that problem solved straight away. Not having a diagnosis about such a difficult and debilitating condition affected my mental health. The person who gave this quotation actually has acquired nystagmus. And so for all of her life, she had had perfectly normal sight and then suddenly acquired nystagmus, and she doesn't know why. It's still being investigated, but she does know that it probably won't go away again. So this lack of diagnosis in her case has really affected her mental health. She's really suffering with that not knowing problem. I do always mention bullying and nystagmus. Schools will tell you that they don't tolerate any bullying at all, but I'm afraid that bullying does happen, and that can be in the form of just some simple name calling or even excluding a child from a group of friends. I do know that it happens because it happened to my daughter, and I talk to lots of other parents who know it happens. This is my daughter, and she says, "I have nystagmus. At primary school, I was called Alien Eyes. Do I look like an alien to you?" And of course, I don't think my daughter looks anything like an alien. Here's a quote from a chap who has lived in the UK and more recently in New Zealand. And he says, "My head shaking causes some social embarrassment. If I'm listening to people quite intensely, they can get the impression that I'm disagreeing with them." He's talking about head shaking and also head nodding, which people with nystagmus do sometimes have. It's thought to be a way of compensating for the eye movements and an attempt to try and clarify the vision or get the vision as good as it can be. If a child shakes or nods their head because of their nystagmus, obviously it should never be discouraged, but the child needs to know that other children might find that a bit unusual and a bit different, and it will mark them out as different and can of course lead to some name calling or bullying. And with adults too, it can make you come across as being a little bit different. So you need to chat to your friends maybe and talk to them about why you do it, and just explain that and be aware that you do it and what impression that might make on other people. Try and let them know that you're not actually disagreeing with what they say. We've talked a lot over the pandemic months and year now about resilience and the need for it. And at the Nystagmus Network, particularly in our Adults Forum, we've talked about resilience a lot too, why we need it and what difference it can make. And here's a quote from one member of our Adults Forum. He says, "Misjudging a step, being misunderstood because we're not looking someone in the eye, struggling to see a train departure board or a menu, all these experiences can help build our resilience, and that's not diminished when we choose to ask for help." We were discussing at the time the fine line between trying to remain totally independent and self-reliant as a person with nystagmus, even living through a global pandemic and all the additional issues that that has brought for people with social distancing, mask wearing and so on. And when it's okay to ask for help, and whether that really does mean it's a sign of our weakness or giving in. And this person is trying to explain that in fact it isn't. We are still showing our independence and our resilience in choosing to ask for help and support when we need it. So for discussion, I'd like to put a few questions forward. So what can help us the most? Are any of our character traits, our social interactions, our choices about where we live and work, down to our nystagmus? Perhaps we can think about our lifestyles with nystagmus and wonder whether any of the decisions that we've made, any choices that we've taken, have been because of our nystagmus. What can most improve our quality of life? Is it greater awareness? Is it the Nystagmus Care Pathway that the NUC group are putting together? Is it our own resilience? Or maybe it's something different. Maybe it's more research. Finally, I'd like to invite everyone to join us for our annual Open Day this year on Saturday, the 25th of September. Because of the uncertainty around the pandemic, we have chosen to make this another virtual event, just as last year. It will be even bigger and better than last year, though, with lots of interesting presentations, workshops, forums, activities, competitions, and so on. So I would invite everyone to join us online on Saturday, the 25th of September. And please remember that the Nystagmus Network is here for you. You can find us online at www.nystagmusnetwork.org. You can email us at any time about any aspect at all of nystagmus at info@nystagmusnet.org. You can call us on 01427 718 093, or you will find us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to fielding your questions later on. Thank you very much.